Welcome to the Genealogy Happy Hour, a place where new family historians can learn to document their family histories and celebrate their new discoveries. I'm Amy.
And I'm Penny, and we're here to help you discover your family tree from the beginning.
Welcome to episode 93. Today we are going to be discussing the use of Gazetteers in our genealogical research. But before we begin, Penny, do we have a wine for today?
We do indeed have a wine. It is from the A to Z or A-Z Wineworks. It's a Pinot Gris from Oregon. And the description from Tim Fish at Wine Spectator is pretty honeysuckle aromas lead to an engaging lemon sorbet and melon flavors.
Nice.
I think that sounded really good.
Nice. I do like A to Z.
Yeah.
And I like their Pinot Noir too. So, good choice.
That's the choice for today.
Today's episode is sponsored by newspapers.com, your go-to resource for unlocking the stories of your ancestors. Dive into the newspapers where your family's history unfolds as you search nearly 1 billion pages in seconds. Newspapers.com offers an unparalleled treasure trove of historical newspapers, providing a window into the past. With newspapers from the 17th century to today, newspapers.com is the largest online newspaper archive. It's a goldmine for anyone seeking to uncover the stories from the past. Whether you're a seasoned genealogist or just starting your journey, newspapers.com makes it easy to search for obituaries, birth announcements, and the everyday stories that shaped your family. It's like having a time machine at your fingertips. And here's the best part. Our listeners get an exclusive offer. Use promo code HAPPYHOUR for a 20% discount on your subscription. That's Happy Hour at newspapers.com. Sign up today at newspapers.com and embark on a journey of discovery.
So, Amy, before we jump into our Gazetteer discussion, I think we have a couple updates or some things we want to mention.
We need to do a shout out too, don't we?
We do.
All
so
right. A couple shout outs.
This shout out is for one of our listeners, Sandra Robertson from Denton County Genealogical Society.
Denton County, Texas.
Denton County, Texas. And it was so interesting when I got an email asking if we'd be okay they posted something about our podcast in their newsletter.
Thank you so much for that.
And it's a lovely newsletter. I read it today. It was it's done very well. I was really impressed with it. But when they had reached out to us, I was like, oh, I know where Denton County is. So I lived in Carrollton, which is not in Denton County, but
the
Carrollton,
Dallas-Fort Worth
Texas,
area.
Dallas-Fort Worth area. My daughter was born there.
Mm-hmm. But I went to the University of North Texas for 2 years in Denton, and my father I grew up in far north Dallas, and then my father ended up moving up to Highland Village in Denton County, and then he lived in Little Elm, which is in Denton County as well, before he ended up moving here to Florida in his senior years. But anyway, yeah, so we're very familiar with Denton County, and really fun. We're so glad that we've got people who are listening to us from there. So
shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for putting us in your newsletter. We also got some feedback on our local history from a listener in Maine. She was very kind to share her story with us on town reports that are in different local towns.
Right.
And she is, I wrote back, I said, lucky you, because she has a lot of copies from her grandparents that saved all these town reports.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
So she's got a wealth of information about her town, and she had tried to do some research on one of her ancestors, and some questions were answered, some questions were not, but
using the town reports,
yes,
which is different than in the South where we're very focused on counties rather than towns, but up especially in New England, it's the town. That's where all the towns have their own records. So you could definitely find those in your local library. I'm sure they have copies of all of those, and those would be really good.
Yeah, or
good
obviously
resource.
Go to your neighbors and see if they're hoarding them somewhere too. Do you have the town reports? Oh my gosh, I would be so excited to have all that information.
Right.
And the last thing.
Oh, The Three Daniels,
The Three Daniels.
episode 83. Do we have an update on your Three Daniels?
We have an update. I finally, just this week, got my pension file that I ordered from NARA. Came in, and it came in electronically, which obviously was the way I ordered it. And it's 107 pages.
Wow.
A lot to go through. Mm-hmm. But there was... And I'm still processing a lot of it, but there was a letter written by Daniel describing his service and what his affliction was. It was in great detail.
His affliction is as to why he was needing the pension.
Correct.
So why did he need the pension?
So he had chronic diarrhea and piles.
Oh.
And I was like, what's piles? I had to look it up. I didn't know. I'm not familiar with piles. I am familiar with piles.
Now you are. Now you know what they are.
So we're going to call them hemorrhoids.
There you go.
That is not the way it was described in this letter.
Oh.
It was very descriptive.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it was descriptive so he would get more money.
Correct.
I don't know. But it was quite the interesting read.
He was suffering, huh?
He was suffering.
Okay.
He was suffering a great deal. I thought you all would enjoy knowing that.
Thanks for sharing. But this was your Daniel of the Three Daniels.
This was my Daniel.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So you've got over 100 pages to process.
100 pages, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, I'm sure you'll continue to update us on that.
Yes, if I find anything good. All right, Gazetteers.
Gazetteers. Okay, so what is a gazetteer? Have we heard of a gazetteer before? A gazetteer is simply a geographical index or dictionary of a place with descriptions. They describe an area such as the towns, the topography, the geography of the location. Sometimes they may not even be called a gazetteer. Sometimes they're called a dictionary, a directory, or an index. And they include probably maps and atlases. They're always organized alphabetically. And we should always pay attention to the abbreviations in the beginning and other publication information so we understand the content and where it's coming from. But the good news is that these gazetteers have been published for hundreds of years, so we can locate them published probably pretty close to when our ancestor lived in that area. So that gives us a good idea of what was going on in the area where our ancestor lived.
Yeah, I know when we decided on this topic, I've spent some time looking at the ones, especially in England, which had maps included with them, which was really great. So you could actually see where the town was at that particular year.
Right.
Loved that.
Right. They're good for trying to pinpoint and locate. If you know where your ancestor came from in Europe, or like you said, in the UK, Ireland, they're great, but also here in the United States. I know we talk about the Red Book a lot here on our podcast, and you're going to get more detailed information in a gazetteer than you would in the Red Book. But it's probably going to be less information than you would in a county history or the town reports or something like that. It's going to be a little bit more generalized than that.
Yeah, and I think too, depending on how big the town was or how important it was, or just thinking of it, the few that I found, one would list what the industry was. One said cattle was not good from this town, right? Or agriculture wasn't great, but they did have a big a mill for wool.
Right.
So
right.
That was their benefit.
Right. I found the Gazetteer of the State of Vermont, which was published in 1824 by Zadok Thompson. And my ancestors lived in Vermont in the late 18th century. So I know they were there in the 1780s, 1790s, and they were there in 1800. But what the Gazetteer, the information I was able to get out of the Gazetteer that really helped me was, well, first of all, I found it it was indexed on, it was imaged on the Internet Archive, which is great because you can just go page by page. It's color, it's
like
digitized.
looking at the book.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And the table of contents shows that how the publication is organized. It went by, geographical descriptions, natural history, political institutions, and society. And then it went basically from A to Z, all the little towns, the counties, everything, and gave a little descriptor. So I looked up Pownell in Bennington County, and it said that it was a settlement that was started in 1761, and by 1791, the population was 1/3 of Bennington County and 1/5 of the state, and that there was about 1,746 inhabitants. It said there were numerous dairy farms, and that made sense to me now because when I was on FamilySearch.org looking at the records that they had digitized from this area, there were earmarks that were recorded from the cattle. And I think one of my ancestors had an earmark there. So now I know, what kind of cattle was being raised or what they were doing with, why the cattle were there. Because they had dairy farm. He was a dairy farmer, right? They said they had very good dairy farms there.
All right.
And then later in the book, or in the publication, when it kind of gave an overview of Vermont, this was very interesting. It said about 1810, immigration into Vermont slowed because of a period of very cold seasons, is what they said. And the inhabitants left for better climate conditions along the Ohio. I'm assuming it's the Ohio River.
Mm-hmm, it sounds like it.
Then by 1817, the climate warmed and emigration from Vermont stopped. So this is interesting because, like I said, my ancestors were there in the 1800 census. They were enumerated. Mm-hmm. But in 1810, they had left and they had gone south to the middle of New York State. And then by 1820, they were in Ohio.
Okay.
Which is what some of the Ohio research that we did when we went on our little road trip. So now I understand why my ancestors left Vermont and kind of went south and then west.
It was freezing.
So yeah, it was very cold, and then it got warmer. So they had like a little.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect
10 to 15,
sense.
10 years there, or 7 years there when it was really cold. So. It also said that all of the early settlers were almost wholly of English descent. So that also gives me a clue as to probably, the origin of my ancestors who were living there in right after the Revolutionary War.
That's very helpful. Yeah.
And then a few years ago, I purchased the New York Family History Research Guide and Gazetteer, published by the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society. I think I bought it at one of the NGS family conferences. And in addition, it also has, to the Gazetteer, for all the New York counties, which is very helpful. It also lists all the repositories, the print and online resources for the counties. So it's just got a whole bunch of these, have a whole bunch of information that you can get for the modern ones who are republished that really help you with your genealogical research. So Not only does it tell, in the census for 1910, it says, my ancestors live in Smithville. Mm-hmm. Well, I can find Smithville in the Gazetteer, in that county, and then what resources are available. So for that county, it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, I noted when you were talking about how big the town was and all that. I know I looked up somebody in the West Virginia Gazetteer that went through all the different counties and towns, and not every town was listed in there. But the one town I was looking for, this town of Scott, back in 1892, had a population of 120, and that's where my family was at that time. So I'm like, 120. This is a tiny town.
Tiny town, right? Well, speaking of tiny towns, we all, those of us who need to do research in Germany, particularly. Or anywhere in Europe, you have to know the town. You have to know where they are from. And so Gazetteers come in really handy for that. There's, for German research, there's Meyer's Gazetteer of the German Empire, which was published in 1912. And Ancestry has it imaged on their website. Go into the catalog on Ancestry, put in Gazetteer, Germany, and it'll pop right up. But I put the tiny little town where my grandfather was born in Germany, Biesland, and it's literally, it's a crossroads, and that's all. that's there, but it pops up. It's recorded in the Gazetteer. It comes up. Now you got to get your Google Translate out. You got to put your camera on so you can. And it gives you a location. Like biggest city where it's near. So that will help you then find it on a map.
Right, and then where records might be.
Correct. Exactly right. Exactly right. So.
Yeah. Oh, that just makes me want to. My family that does come from Germany, in this little town of Kirchwalsede, their records are all held in the bigger town down the road, which I love to say the name Visselhoevede. I know that's probably not how you say it, but we love to say Visselhoevede. Anyway, great town. And a lot of those records are now online too at Ancestry. And just speaking of, I have to say, it's when we're doing research, and we all probably have a ton of people in our tree. Like we're constantly adding people to our tree. Mm-hmm. And we're not researching every one of them all the time. But when you circle back to somebody that maybe you haven't looked at in a year or two, it's amazing what records are now available. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, it wasn't there before. And now I've got a marriage record. Yeah. And, because I know they have the shaky leaves with the, all the, I can't go through all those hints. Mm-hmm. It's just whoever I'm working on. Right. Otherwise I'd be just swamped with checking out all those hints. But it's incredible what they're constantly being digitized. Constantly
digitizing more. Yep, for sure. So you always have to circle back.
Yeah.
Always circle back. So, the other thing that a Gazetteer is good for is the names and spellings change over time, and where your ancestor may have been enumerated might have changed names. So a Gazetteer then will help you then cross-reference to find what the current city's name is or where it exists.
Also, like when you're talking about the one from Germany,
Myers,
how Germany changed, where not that the town moved, but the
borders,
boundaries,
the borders were constantly moving,
and also West Virginia becoming a state was Virginia,
right.
Look at your time period and whatnot.
Absolutely. A couple other ones, again, for the UK, there's several. The Gazetteer of British Place Names and the National Gazetteer of Great Britain and Ireland. And that one was published in 1868. So again, looking for not only ones that are currently published, but ones that were published closer to the time when your ancestor lived there. That will help you even more. Another thing you'll find in the Gazetteers is the churches that were there, the schools that were there, and we all know that those are places where we can find family records. And then the land and civil registration offices, like you said, the registration wasn't in this little town, it was in the next town over. So it will help guide you to where you need to find or where those records would have at least been initially recorded. So, and then migration patterns and transportation, you're going to find out, was there a train that came through the town? Or, in my case, I found that migration, the reason why my ancestors migrated, but maybe, how did these two people get married when they lived, across in two different places across the state? Well, if there's, a train going through there,
certainly
very easy.
And I had a couple using the one from England, finding, the town that their ancestor lived in. For one of the things it said in the description was what station, the train station in that town was even listed. Yeah, right. So it's like, okay,
yep. Or a lot of times they'll have post offices. Mm-hmm. The location is the post office, so you'll be able to determine where that is.
Yeah.
Using the Gazetteers. So definitely something you need to look at. You can Google them. You can find them. Where do we find these, Penny?
So we can find them on my first go-to would be go to the Family Search Wiki.
Yes.
That's they have links. Just about everything linked links there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let's see, Google Books is a good place to go. Absolutely. Internet Archives, we mentioned, that's also excellent. Lippincot's Gazetteer of the World, I liked, because you can find little towns everywhere. Let's see.
Library of Congress. We mentioned Ancestry. Mm-hmm. They have about 100 of them, I think.
I think you mentioned it. The Hadi Trust.
Yep. And then WorldCat, if you want to locate them in physical copy, WorldCat. The repository is nearby. So, but yeah, and also look for genealogical societies that maybe have published for their state or for their county too. Republish some things as well.
Yeah,
so
that's good. We will. I'm saying this very loosely. If y'all go to our websites, I'm not the best on keeping them updated as quickly as possible, if you can believe it. But we will put these links on our website for you.
Absolutely. All right. So go check out those Gazetteers. Hopefully you'll find some information about the locations where your ancestors lived and maybe be able to find some more documents and understand your ancestors a little better. Until next time. Cheers. Thank you for listening. Please email us with any questions or comments at genealogyhappyhour@gmail.com.
Visit our website, www.genealogyhappyhour.com, for additional resources, books, and wines. Don't forget to drink responsibly
and never drink around genealogical documents.